Hey everybody, welcome to my monthly threat webinar series. My name is John Clay. I'm VP of Threat Intelligence at Trend Micro here. And this is my August 2021. Before we get started, a couple of things I wanted to make note of. First is this actually starts my 7th year of doing these monthly threat webinars. So if any of you have been along for that entire journey, thank you very much. For you new folks, I hope you can continue to attend these. I try every month to give you a different type of content topic. I try to focus most of the topics around the latest threats that are targeting organizations around the world. And as many of you who have attended in the past, I try to stay away from solutions. I try to focus more on the technology behind what are detecting these threats so that you have some understanding and capabilities and can actually talk to your security vendors about their technology and whether they can help protect you. Also, I celebrated in July my 25th year of working at Trend Micro. It's been a wild and fun journey over these years. Actually, 34 years in technology. Many of you probably don't know, but I started as a programmer. So any of you programmers out there, I applaud you, especially if you stuck with it for a long time. I only lasted about 3 years, but it was a great and fun thing. I actually programmed in machine learning, which a lot of you probably don't do much of that anymore. It's all C+ and scripts and everything, but back then it was in machine learning because my degree from Michigan State University, go Spartans, it was in electrical engineering and some computer engineering. So I did a lot of programming, machine learning. But enough of my history. Let's talk about what we're going to be talking about today, which is business email compromise. That's a threat that's been around for quite a long time, and I thought it would be a good topic for people to do. We've done a lot of, and everybody's hearing about ransomware these days, but it's definitely a threat that is still targeting organizations and still causing a lot of financial harm against organizations. So let's get into it. As I do every month, I do want to first talk about the month in reviews. This comes from my Friday morning blog that gets published every Friday. I try to give you a synopsis of what has occurred over the past week, articles that we've published, articles from the industry that have been published, and I try to take some of the ones from the last month that I think are interesting and noteworthy. The first one here is Tokyo Olympics. Being that the Olympics were in Japan and Trend Micro is headquartered in Tokyo in Japan, we were actually quite instrumental in helping the Tokyo Olympics secure their infrastructure. And so we're starting to publish some interesting information about what we saw during the Olympics this past last month. And so a good article, you'd be interested. We'll probably be doing more as we come out with more information about what was found and what was seen during the Olympics. Now a consortium to prevent cyber attacks on connected cars. So this is a new consortium that's being developed for the connected car industry. We've been doing a lot of research in connected cars, and we're going to be joining this consortium and offering lending our expertise in attacks that are targeting the connected car infrastructure and within connected cars. So another initiative that we as an organization are trying to do to improve the security of devices and things out there on the Internet of Things or industrial Internet of Things. I mentioned ransomware. Obviously, it seems like every month there's something new coming up, and this one is called the Chaos ransomware. It's a proof of concept that we actually identified and found, and it's been monitoring. There's been, I think, 3 versions over the last month that have been published by the actor gang that they've used. And it's an interesting story because it kind of goes from beginning stages of ransomware, new ransomware malware, and what they implemented inside that ransomware, moving it ahead and seeing some new things. So it was quite interesting. It's quite an interesting evolution. I recommend you read that article and you kind of see how a lot of these ransomware gangs, ransomware developers, or malware developers go about implementing and improving their creation. ENISA says system failure is on the rise. So this was a report from ENISA, which is a European organization, and a lot of good information in there. They were talking a lot about threats that were targeting European organizations, but obviously these same type of threats target all organizations around the world. So even if you're in America here, you can certainly find benefit from the information found in their report. And this just talks about some of the items, but I definitely recommend you download their report and take a look at it. It's very good. And the last one is a kind of a pet project of mine I've been doing for 4+ years now. It's called our Cyber Risk Index, and it's a survey we partner with the Ponemon Institute. If you're aware of them, they also do the IBM data breach report. They've done a lot of surveying over the years, and they're a very good organization. But we take a look at it a little differently in terms of we surveyed about 3,600 plus organizations around the world, and this is a good snapshot of what's happening around the world. And we break down the results based on the different regions. We even have state or country level results. But what is interesting here is we actually take a look at 2 areas of the threat landscape. So one, we look at your preparedness. So that we ask questions about how prepared is an organization to face attacks against them. And then the second area is we actually look at the attacks and how many attacks did you see, how bad are the attacks, what types of threats are you getting targeted against or with. And we take those 2 and we actually do an algorithm and calculate what we call the Cyber Risk Index. And it gives you a good synopsis of where the risk is today or what level of risk. And it's a +10 to -10, -10 being the highest risk, +10 being you're the most prepared you could possibly be. And right now, globally, it's at a -0.42. So we're at an elevated risk right now. But you can go to trendmicro.com/cyberrisk, and you can take a look at that page. There's actually a link to a shortened version of that survey that you can take yourself and kind of get an idea of where your risk would be. So, all of these are good. Again, this comes from my Friday morning blog. Certainly, if you want to follow that, you'll get a good synopsis of what's going on each week. So with that, let's move into business email compromise, or BEC. Going to kind of talk about what it is and what we're seeing here, who's being targeted, and so forth. And then I'll follow up at the end with kind of what you want to look for with in terms of technologies that you want to be looking for from your vendors to combat this threat against you, and also some best practices you can do. So as I said, it's not ransomware, but it really is still affecting a lot of organizations out there. This you can see here, FBI publishes data every year on how the amount of money lost by cybercrime. This is actually a more overall number, 4.2 billion officially lost to cybercrime in 2020. Obviously, there are reports out there, and there's organizations out there that are saying this is trillions of dollars are being lost every year. But this comes from the FBI, and these are only the cases that they deal with. So it's a much smaller subset of what the total monetary losses from cybercrime, but I thought I'd give you that. But here's actually their numbers on BEC over the years. So you can see it has been increasing. So back in 2018, it was about 1.3 billion, 2019, 1.75 billion, and then 2020, it was almost 1.9 billion, almost $2 billion losses. And again, these are just to the FBI. So this is more likely just US-based customers or organizations that have lost this type of money. We have seen, organizations that have lost anywhere from, majority are probably in the tens of thousands, but there have been organizations that have been frauded out of, millions of dollars in BEC attacks against their organization. So it definitely is impacting organizations. It does cause some major financial issues for organizations. And it is a crime that, as you can see, has been increasing year over year. When we look at our customers, when we detect business email compromise attacks against our customers, here's our data. So you can see here, this is the first half of this year, 2021. You can see it has been growing steadily month over month. So we started at about 4,500 attacks against customers in January. Now we're up to about 8,500. Again, these aren't attacks that were successful. These are BEC detections inside these customers. So hopefully we blocked the threat for our customers and made them protected against it. And again, a lot of this comes via email. And if you look at some of our data, you know that email is still the vast majority of detections that we have at Trend Micro. When we see billions and billions of threats blocked every year across our customer base, and about 90% still are email based. So email is certainly still the major vector for cyber criminals out there to target businesses. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So how does it work? And I'm going to go through a couple of slides here in terms of different types of BEC, but this actually comes from the FBI publishes this on their BEC webpage. And you can see, step one, identify the target. So how are you going to identify it? Step two is grooming the target. So, and again, in an email, usually it's an email conversation back and forth between the victim and the actor, the malicious actor, to try and build trust. The third one is the exchange of information. So the payload essentially is sending an email and trying to get that person to do a task, which is in most cases, it's a wire transfer of money from the organization to the criminal's bank account. And that's kind of a generalized statement or flow of how this works. So they identify a target, they groom an employee, they send an email to the employee takes action on that email, thinking it's coming from a trusted source, and they do a wire transfer of money. Now, again, the wire transfer of money is just one case, and so let's look at some of the different areas. But when you look at impersonation, so who are they going to impersonate? And you can see here, this is, again, our data that comes from the detections that we saw. Executives are by far who they are impersonating. So the email that your employee is going to receive is many times going to purport to come from one of your executives, your CEO, your CFO, a VP, something like that, even a manager. External, so this is also where they send an email purporting to come from an external, maybe a supplier or a vendor of your organization. Internal, again, this is just internal people, so they will look to compromise email accounts inside the organization and utilize that email account to send business email compromise emails to internal employees. And then finance, coming from impersonating a finance person. Usually it's not that way. It's usually that's who's being targeted, not being impersonated. But again, who do they target inside your organization? So what types of employees are going to be targeted by business email compromise attacks? And you can see here, probably the number one is going to be your finance employees. So they will do their due diligence and find out who works in finance inside your organization. As I said, on the external side, it's your suppliers. It's your supply chain vendors that are inside your supply chain. Something like that. Human resources employees are another big target of business email compromise as well. Legal, your lawyers, your legal employees who work in the legal side of your house, of your organization, are also going to be targeted in these attacks. We've seen a shift and move towards getting these, targeting the legal profession employees as well. And then executives are definitely going to be targeted. In a lot of cases, these are who they're going to target initially up front because they want to get access to their accounts and use their accounts to send emails into the finance group or the human resources organization, the legal organization. So certainly your executives are a big target of the attackers. Now, excuse me, it's a tea type of day today. There's 5 different types of business email compromise that the FBI talks about. And the first is the bogus invoice. So again, this one is where the criminal will compromise an employee email account. They will monitor that email account. And especially, again, if this is a finance person that maybe they targeted, and they get that finance person, they will start monitoring the emails going out to your suppliers. And they'll identify those suppliers or those vendors who you send invoices to, and then they will send that information over to your supplier. They will send a bogus invoice to that supplier purporting to come from your organization, and then they will pay them by transferring money into that cyber criminals bank account. So that's one. So again, that's more of an inside-out business email compromise, where they will target a team inside, but then they will send that bogus invoice outside. It could also, sorry, let me go back to the bogus invoice. It could also be one where they identify your suppliers, and they will send your finance team, a bogus invoice. And then you will pay that bogus invoice. And again, you're paying it out to the cyber criminal. So it could be both directions. It could be bidirectional, depending on what their motive is and how they wanted to do it. CEO fraud. This is probably the biggest one that we see out there with business email compromise today, where the cyber criminal poses as a company executive and emails finance or emails HR or emails the legal group. And then finance sends the funds to the criminal's account. Pretty straightforward in this case. In a lot of cases, they are grooming that finance person here. They may send some emails purporting to come from that CEO. They may have, the language inside that email could have urgency. It could have stuff. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But again, in this case, they're purporting to be and impersonating a executive inside the organization. Account compromise. This is where they compromise, again, an employee account used to request payment. The recipient transfers payment accounts to the cyber criminal's account. So this is where they are looking to, excuse me, compromise the email accounts inside the organization. Attorney impersonation. Again, I mentioned that the attorney's legal profession is definitely being targeted here. They pose as a lawyer or an email finance. Again, it could be that they're saying, we have third-party counsel, and here's a invoice from third-party counsel, and it needs to be paid today. The other one they may be looking at here is identifying certain information about financial transactions your organization is doing via the legal organization. But again, the whole intent here is to have money transferred into that cyber criminal's account. And the last one is data theft. And this is where you see more on the HR side of the house. So they'll compromise or they'll utilize that CEO or executive impersonation. The compromised account is used to request PII data, personally identifiable information. It may be to look at tax information and human resource information about that employee. And again, they can take that information and then they will either sell that in the underground to other criminals, or they may utilize it in attacks against that individual in the future. Maybe where identity theft could be used. So they could be doing some financial fraud or tax fraud against that employee after they receive that information. Those are the different types of business email compromise that we see. It all, though, begins with that intelligence gathering that we talked about earlier. This is a key part of the attack life cycle that the criminals are going to do, because first and foremost, they're going to identify who they want to target. So what victim they want to target, what type of business do they want to target. And then once they identify that, that's when they start really doing their due diligence, excuse me, and doing some searching, like in LinkedIn for sure, of who works at that company, what division they work in. Again, they're looking for finance people, they're looking at HR, so they're going to scour through the LinkedIn data on employees. They may look at targeting inside the organization and pulling up employee lists, something like that. But they're going to figure that all out up front before they even target the organization. So they'll do a lot of that intelligence gathering up front. And then in a lot of these cases, there's an attack before the BEC attack. So again, in this case, it's mostly about obtaining credentials and obtaining email credentials from the employees out there. So we're seeing a lot of Office 365 phishing attacks. You can kind of see that here in the graphic, where that employee will receive an email. If they click on a link or open an attachment, it'll pop up with an Office 365 login account or login screen. And an employee, unbeknownst to them, not realizing that they need to re-log into their Office 365, will enter their credentials. And again, those credentials then go straight to the criminal so that they can take over that account and impersonate that person utilizing their account. You can see here again, this is an example of a credential theft here. Credential phishing sites are looking very good today. The criminals have done a very good job of ensuring that what they pop up looks very, very similar to what the employee typically sees when they do a account login. So you can see it could be a fake URL, but sometimes valid SSL signs. Sometimes within a legitimate domain they may be utilizing. So they have compromised a legitimate domain out there, and they use that. But again, if the employee is not observant, they may just not even bother to look at that information. There's, favicon is usually identical. So in this case, you can see in the Microsoft up in the upper left on the folder, it's the Microsoft icon, which is, available to anybody out there. Login form looks very similar to the real website. Displays the user's email and address in the form usually. So again, they populate their form with the information that they've obtained. But whenever email accounts are taken over, there's a number of things, right? They can spy, they can steal data, access service, send phishing mails internally. Certainly in the BEC here that we see is usually in between there. So employee A gets a compromised device, their email credentials are compromised, then they will send that BEC or fraud email to another employee inside your organization. You can see in a lot of cases, so if the employee actually, we talked about that grooming component where they will be going back and forth. And, we've even seen instances where there's been a conversation over a month's time with an employee where they just go back and forth. And again, it's really to build trust amongst themselves and the victim. And again, they're impersonating people all the time, so they're going to try and make it sound, really good and convincing. But you can see here in a lot of cases, so if they hit so even if they get an email from that account that they've stolen, when they respond to that, they do a reply to. In a lot of cases, it may be replying to the criminal's email account. So like in here, you can see. there's insecure email provider, there's a forged domain, the reply is to a free email service. And again, a lot of times employees that, they're very busy, they've got lots of emails to deal with, they don't even realize when they hit reply and they type their message and they send off, they don't realize they don't maybe looking at the header information or information on where that email is going. So they just assume it's going back to the person that's being impersonated, when in fact it's actually going to the criminal. So lots of techniques that they're doing there. Payroll fraud, certainly we're seeing, rerouting checks by direct deposit. So I mentioned earlier about the HR one where they try to get information, HR, about the employee. This was actually an email, a BEC email that was sent to one of our employees. And you can see it's very, very short, very simple, where they send that email to somebody in our finance group. And it said, "Hi, I changed my bank and would like to change the details of my payroll account. Can this change be effective for the current pay cycle?" So what they were trying to do here is change the employee's bank account where their auto deposit paycheck went to, from the employee's bank account to the criminal bank account, so that the next payroll check that gets auto deposited into that person's account wouldn't get deposited there, it would get deposited into the criminal account. So this is one that we're seeing quite often out there as well. And again, it's a little different from the original, the CEO fraud, where it was, it's sending an email to finance and saying, "Hey, I need you to wire transfer money to this company, and here's the account information." A little bit different. Now they're trying to steal employees' paychecks. They're also moving down in the employee level, we're starting to see. So in this case, it's asking an employee to transfer money on the behalf of a director, and asking the employee to purchase gift cards. This is one that we're starting to see a lot more. So instead of impersonating the CEO or impersonating executive, they're impersonating the boss of the employee. So again, they, through a lot of the, whether it's through account compromise, where they're monitoring the emails between the employee and others in the organization. Obviously, employees send emails to their boss quite often, and so they will identify who that boss is, and then they can craft that socially engineered email. But you can see here, they just, you can visit, would you be able to have a $750 sent to someone via Western Union on my behalf? I'll have the money back to you. You can visit the website for the transfer online here. Gives you information. Gift card scams. Again, please help me get iTunes gift card from my store around. The amount you need to get is $50. Please email the 16-digit PIN number on the back of the card. So again, this is where a boss may be asking the employee to buy a gift card for them, and they'll reimburse them for that fund. So gift cards are also starting to become quite popular. Now, just recently, Microsoft talked about MFA weaknesses, where these scammers were able to use a legacy protocol like IMAP or POP3 to exfil emails and circumvent the multi-factor authentication on the Exchange Online accounts. So the targets failed to toggle off legacy auth in that for that account. So this is a challenge, obviously, because one of the things we tell everybody to do is enable multi-factor authentication. Well, here's a case where the scammers were able to bypass that multi-factor authentication component, and they use that to be able to sign in and steal the credentials of the victims, still even without by bypassing that MFA. So in this case, the MFA wouldn't kick in, and again, maybe employees don't realize it, may not realize that they didn't get an MFA request, but they still just log in. So that's business email compromise. Again, it's not I wouldn't say it's a sophisticated attack by any sense of the term. It's actually pretty easy to do. It's pretty simple attack. And again, in most cases, all they are doing is a socially engineered email, and they're getting people to think they are working with a trusted source, and they are doing something that they do every day, right? Your finance people are probably doing wire transfers to organizations all the time, into different bank accounts all the time. They are just utilizing social engineering in order to get people to do something that they do all the time, but just do it to them. And so let's talk a little bit about best practices here. And again, before we jump into this, I just wanted to say that if you have questions, or there's a Q&A button you can select and just type in your question. I'll attempt to get to everybody's questions. If I don't get to yours, I'll probably email you an answer back afterwards. Good news, though, is just recently Microsoft was able to take down a bunch of people. So that same attack that I mentioned earlier with the MFA, Microsoft was able to take down the domains used, and so stopping the threat and its tracks, so to speak. So, the good news is we do have law enforcement acting upon this. We do have organizations that can try and take down the infrastructure. Almost all the attacks these days have some form of an infrastructure associated with it, but in some cases not. But, if they register domains as part of their attack sequence, in a lot of cases we can maybe identify those domains and get them blocked or get them taken down, in this instance. But there's one thing, in terms of things you can do is really educating your employees. The number one way to stop these attacks is to implement a two-factor verification. I'm not talking multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. It's two-factor verification. So if I'm in finance and I receive an email from my CEO and it says, "Hey, I need you to wire transfer $1 million to this account today. We're doing a special deal with them. By the way, I'm not available. I'm out. So don't try to phone me. Don't try to email back. Just get this done." Don't take that for granted. Pick up the phone, contact your CEO or whoever is requesting that, and verify that this transaction is legitimate. Even if it says I'm not available, because again, they're using that as a way to get around that person contacting the person who is putting the request in. They definitely don't want you to do that. So if you can implement a practice where and I don't know if you want to do it by size of the transaction or not, but because I know in a lot of big organizations you have probably hundreds of these transactions happening every day. But again, if something looks suspicious, smells suspicious, make sure that you educate your employees that this type of attack can happen at any day of the week, and for them to be on that lookout. Think about what could be happening here. Does this look right? Is this a typical type of transaction I get from my supervisor, from the CEO? If I never get an email from my CEO and all of a sudden I get an email from the CEO telling me to wire transfer $1 million, hopefully that rings a bell in them and thinks, hey, this might be suspicious. But again, education and employee training is one of the biggest factors that I think you can do to eliminate or minimize definitely this threat occurring to you. There's a lot of resources available. You can see IC3. Again, if you get targeted and you are affected by this and you do have an employee who wire transfers money, first and foremost, contact your bank financial institution. A lot of times you can get that to be blocked and stopped, but also contact the FBI, IC3, and get them on the case, because in a lot of cases they are able to help out. They also can open an investigation where they can try and track down who these people are, and we can maybe get them arrested. So employee education is huge. One of the challenges that we have with business email compromise is it's unlike a lot of the traditional email-based threats. In most cases, when you see an email threat, it's going to have a weaponized attachment, or it's going to have an embedded link inside the email that tries to get the employee to click on. And in that case, usually it downloads a dropper or a downloader onto the system, or some type of malware onto the system to compromise that system. In like CEO fraud, for example, there is not an attachment. There is not even a link. All it is a message to the employee asking them to do something. So you can see here, these are two emails. One is a legitimate email. One is a fraudulent email. There's basically no difference in these two emails. The word count's the same. The SHA-1 is the same. The message is the same. But one could be a BEC email versus a legitimate email. It's just asking, need a same-day payment at $22,000 made this morning. Let me know if you are available to handle this now, so I can forward details. Need it sorted today. So, in a lot of cases, this employee who gets this will email back. And again, that email is going to go to the criminal. The criminal will send them the information about, here's the bank account, here's the wire transfer information, yada, yada. The employee, if they aren't vigilant and they aren't suspicious of this, may send that $22,000 to the criminal in that case. But again, the challenge with a lot of the email technology we have is it is looking for a weaponized attachment. It is scanning for a weaponized attachment. It's scanning for a link in the email. It's not able to identify that this could be a BEC email. So what we have done, and what a lot of, what you need to talk to when you talk to your messaging security vendors is, have they applied any artificial intelligence or machine learning to identify these types of attacks? So in our case, we have AI-based business email compromise detection. What we do is we have expert rules along with machine learning that look at the behavior and the intention analysis of the email. Add that to authorship analysis utilizing artificial intelligence to identify if that email is malicious or not. So our writing style DNA technology, which is what we utilize, you can see everyone has a very unique style of writing, right? Your CEO is going to write email differently from your CFO, differently from your VP of finance, for example. Everyone's going to write differently. So this is an actual example that we put together where we had 3 different people who wrote up emails. The writing style DNA is able to detect email forgeries by comparing a trained AI model using that person's writing style. So what we do in this case, we train. So we train that information. We look at it the originally. We extract the metadata. Again, we're not extracting PII data. We're not extracting information. We're extracting metadata. And after about 300 to 500 messages that have gone through the modeling, we're able to build a machine learning model that then can be utilized to analyze an email coming from that person on a regular basis. So you can see we have about 7,000 features that we use in our machine learning model to help identify that. So kind of the workflow here is, the imposter sends this email to an employee inside the account, whether it's Office 365 or Microsoft Exchange. We support both. If it doesn't match the AI model of that person who was originally lying, we will send a warning to the recipient. And we'll basically tell them, warning, do not, the style of content below seems much different. Again, you can customize this, but, we basically alert the recipient. We also alert the sender. So in this case, we send it to the actual person and say, hey, we identified an email that purportedly came from you. It didn't match your writing style, so we're checking with you to see, was this legitimate or not? And they can click and say, yeah, yes, or no on that case. But when you look at your security, so that's one technology out of multiple layers. We always talk about building a multiple layer defense strategy. And even within the different areas of your business, you want to have this multi-layered strategy. So in the case of messaging security, you can see here all these different types of technologies that should be applied to your messaging security. So all the way from email sender reputation, sender and domain verification, so DMARC and some of the other technologies that are available there. Anti-malware static, so looking at a signature file. Signatures still do work, but then adding to that, we even have machine learning now scanning to scan the attachments as well. Behavioral scanning, macro detection, document exploits. You can even have a sandbox. So, send attachments, suspicious attachments to a sandbox. Let them blow it up in the sandbox and see if that attachment is weaponized or not, if it's malicious or not. You can even do that with the URLs and put them into a URL sandbox. Social engineering, writing style DNA, which I just talked about. Gateway web reputation, filtering by file type or extension, click time, runtime web reputation. So you're not taking, you're relooking at a link inside the attachment, identifying is it a malicious one. You can scan the web page for scripts and so forth using machine learning there even. So when you do talk to your security vendor who's supplying you your messaging security, these are some of the technologies that you may want to ask them about and identify if they support these or not. If they don't support them, maybe looking at a vendor who can. So that's all I had today. We've been doing this for many, many years. I mentioned my 25th year anniversary at Trend Micro. Trend Micro's been around for 33 years, so I was in the early stages. In fact, one of the first things I worked on when I came aboard in '96, we started to see a lot of email-based threats. So Melissa and I love you were targeting, hitting. I actually worked on her scan mail for CC mail and MS mail at the time. That tells you how old I am. When those technologies were around. But we've been dealing with email security for obviously years and years and years. Lots of expertise there. And again, one of the things we've done as an organization is truly adopted the advanced stuff with artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've been using that technology since 2005. We had a machine learning anti-spam technology, one of the first ever in the industry back then in 2005. One of the funny stories, just to give you, I know we got a little bit of time here before I hit some Q&A, but we had our deep learning team, engineers who came to our anti-spam group and said, hey, we can build a better deep learning based anti-spam engine than we have today, which is based on a different type of machine learning. And so we said, hey, go for it, because we have lots of resources, lots of capabilities that we can do that. We can just say, hey, go build a model and a proof of concept. So they built it, and then we sent about 1 million spam messages through that model, and it detected 0. And so what did we find out about that experiment? It wasn't a waste. What we did find is that deep learning isn't a good technology to apply to anti-spam, to spam. It's a great technology for other types of threats, but that's why we have 30 different types of machine learning and artificial intelligence that we use across our entire solution set and platform. So with that, we'd certainly love to chat with you if you have questions about our technology or not. But let me get to questions. Looks like we have a few questions here. Let's see. Can this technology work for non-hybrid on-prem Exchange 2016? I think possibly, but you're probably best to contact one of our sales engineers to identify if that is implemented. I know it's available in our Exchange product. I don't know if our Exchange product is still supporting Exchange 2016. It probably is, but double check with them. That would be probably best. Any new news about zero-click exploits in regards to business email compromise? Um, so zero-click exploits, I'm assuming, meaning that if I'm a if I if the attackers are using a zero-day exploit to target Exchange servers, are they able to get access to the Exchange servers? So, for example, zero logon just recently, that exploit, zero-day exploit, was used to target Exchange servers and compromise Exchange servers, so that where the attackers could actually log in and create accounts in the Exchange server or modify accounts in the Exchange server. Those certainly are utilized, and we're actually seeing a lot of targets against Exchange and Office 365. The challenge with zero-day, zero-click exploits is, again, they aren't known. So the technology is may be difficult to detect these zero-day exploits. So, but again, the end game of compromising these is to send a business email compromise email into the account. So even if they do that, if you implement our routing style DNA technology, our business email compromise, machine learning technology that we have implemented inside our technology and solutions, our messaging products, we should be able to detect and block that email from actively targeting your employees. So hopefully we can do that. I hope that answers your question. If not, maybe you can reach out to me. You can always contact me, john_clay@trendmicro.com. John is without an H, just Jon. How is BEC different from phishing? That's a great question, because, phishing, certainly a phishing email is intended to do a very similar thing, right? They use socially engineered. Probably the big difference is the phishing emails are usually intended to target your employees to get access into your accounts or into your organization, not necessarily to kick off a business email compromise. Business email compromise usually is like I said, a lot of it is socially engineered, and it doesn't have any link or an attachment. Most phishing emails have a link or an attachment associated with them, and they will pop up, a phishing page, so like the Office 365 login page or something. Whereas in majority of the business email compromise emails, there is no attachment. There's no link. It's just the message is trying to get the employee to do something that they always do or usually do, and to get it to do it to the criminal. What does MFA Weakness in Exchange have to do with the recent Microsoft compromise? I'm not sure there is anything. I don't think it's correlated there. This was just that was an attack that Microsoft identified that was targeting their Office 365 users, and they actually wrote up about it. So you can probably go to their website and find that blog where they write up about that recent attack. I think there was the one that's in the news right now that's talking about their what is it, the tools that they have for web design and low code support development. That's a different one. Also, SolarWinds was tied to Microsoft. I don't think this had anything to do with that. So again, this was a business email compromise attack that they identified recently. That was where the attackers were able to bypass their MFA inside Office 365. What about through text messages, through text messaging? Oh, gotcha. So if I receive it on my phone as a text message, I would say that that's another viable. We haven't seen that method and that vector be utilized by business email compromisers, but it is not unheard of that it couldn't be. So again, if I'm in finance or I'm in HR and I receive a text from my executive, purporting to come from my executive, saying, "Hey, I need you to wire transfer, $10,000 to this account." Again, they should be suspicious. obviously, the challenge there is it'll probably be coming from a different number, because they likely won't be compromising the executive's phone anytime soon, although that it is possible. I wouldn't expect that to happen unless this was a truly maybe a nation state type of attack. But most business email compromises are done by financially motivated actors, not not nation state. But certainly, again, as part of that education process, I would include that, if you receive an email or a text or even a phone call, any of those three mediums could be utilized in a fraud or attack against your organization. So employees should be educated that these attacks could come from any type of vector, email, text, or phone. As an MSP, we see this at least weekly, if not daily. Oftentimes we are asked by the client, how can we stop this? And if there are tools from Trend Micro that can help spotting, identifying these type of attacks, BEC or credential phishing. So again, I would definitely recommend, if you're an MSP, to implement our messaging security with your customers, because again, our messaging security are the latest and greatest stuff, especially our Office 365 technology that can be added in line with the Microsoft native controls for security in Office 365 have this technology and can help there. But again, your biggest protection is to let your customers know to educate their employees, especially those in finance, HR, legal, to expect this type of an attack and to help identify this attack. And again, implement the two-factor verification model for these types. My brother owns a construction business, and he was telling me one of his finance people received an email at one point that purported to come from him. He's the president, CEO of the company. And it said, hey, you need to wire transfer $10,000 to this account. Well, luckily that person was smart enough that they contacted my brother and said, hey, did this come from you? And he's like, what are you talking about? No, it did not. So they were able to stop it. But again, education is probably the biggest one that can be done for business email compromise. What do worry-free security services and email security customers do to enable machine learning and writing style DNA? Again, I would contact Trend Support or to contact one of our SEs to ask them about that. I don't have I'm not quite sure that. Or you can go to our support portal. There could be a best practice guide for enabling that stuff. I don't have that capability to tell you today. With insurers shifting focus to ransomware when reviewing policies, what are the most relevant security measures outside of the basics like MFA training that companies should refer to have as it pertains to BEC? So good question. Again, I have to look into the whether cyber insurance protects against business email compromise fraud. If anybody knows, feel free to let me know. But I don't know if that's because I know ransomware is being covered, so business email compromise potentially could be covered as well. So if you have cyber insurance, I would definitely look into that aspect to ask them if business email compromise attacks would be covered. But certainly, I mentioned the technologies. So you obviously need to have messaging security as part of your cybersecurity defense strategy. But when you look in your messaging security, you want to ensure you have these technologies I mentioned, the newer advanced stuff, the AI and the machine learning technology and features enabled and running in there. So that is one. Also, this is, obviously, when I talked about it today, it's not always going to be from outside in. It could be inside in, right? So if they compromise an account inside your organization and use that, you want to make sure that those messages that are going from inside to inside are also covered by your messaging security layer. So definitely look into that as well as part of your review of your messaging security. Let's see here. It's a long question, but let me see if I can get through it here. So somebody was asking about end users continuing to receive emails. The headers are definitely different. It may be coming from a different country. What else can be done to block these emails? So again, I think if you enact a lot of those layers of technologies I mentioned earlier, especially, for example, like DMARC and those types of things, those types of technologies can definitely go far in eliminating a lot of the emails that are coming into the organization from outside, especially different countries and so forth, and may be able to identify and block those. So certainly look at your messaging security. Make sure you have the latest and greatest versions as well as the features. So one of the things we see a lot of times with customers who get compromised is they may be on the latest and greatest product, but the newer technologies may not be enabled by default. So you would have to go in and actually enable those, because people may be concerned about false positives and things like that. But or maybe they just don't realize that feature was added as part of an update to their product. So definitely look at that and do an audit of your current security controls, email security controls, and make sure you have the latest, greatest stuff, but also that those technologies are enabled, because maybe they aren't. That's all the questions that I have so far. I know we're about at the end of the hour, but so I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time out. We have recorded this. It will be recorded. You will be sent a link with the recording in case you want to send that to some of your colleagues or people that might be interested in watching this on demand. But also you will receive the slides. So if you want those to utilize in an education scenario or something, feel free to use those. But with that, I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of your days. Please stay safe, stay healthy, have a good rest of your day and week, and hopefully summer continues to be nice and warm for us all and we get a chance to get out there. So thanks, have a great day. I'll talk to hopefully everybody next month with a new webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.